Good morning, everyone. Happy to moderate today our second keynote speaker, Nelly Abboud from Lebanon. Let me tell you a bit about Nelly. She's archaeologist and museum educator with over 15 years experience in the field. She was an active member of ICOM from 29 to 2022. I don't know why you left, actually, you, Nelly, but maybe you can tell us. She will tell. From 2019 to 2022, she served as a board member and she was the MENA regional coordinator for the ICOM Committee of Education and Cultural Action. In this role, she worked to promote education and cultural action in the museum sector across the MENA region. And this is the Middle East and North African region. Nelly was and is committed to promoting access to education and cultural experiences through museums. Her expertise and leadership have helped to advance the field of museum education and cultural action, both in Lebanon and beyond. In 2017, she co-founded an organization called MuseoLab, with a focus on promoting cultural heritage using experiential learning methodology. At MuseoLab, they are committed to providing ongoing support to participants and ensuring that they have the skills and knowledge necessary to make a positive impact in their communities. From 2020 until 2022, she worked with a German organization called Meet Ost as a mentor for cultural projects happening in the Middle East and North African, the MENA region. Nelly has also provided guidance on project planning, fundraising, and stakeholder engagement, among other topics. She is an author on several articles and chapters in peer-reviewed journals and books. Almost no need to say that she is passionate about researching community archaeology, public memory, oral history, museum education, and collective impacts. A bit about Nelly. In her presentation with the intriguing title, Beirut's Afterlife, Afterlives, Heritage, Remembrance, and Amnesia, she takes us to the past, the present, and the future of Beirut building, as it is called now. Through the story of this building, we will also learn about the history and the present of Beirut. She explores different concepts dealing with remembrance and memory, but also with a sometimes deep felt wish to forget and move forward. To not display, but erase history. Her thoughts lead her also to the fundamental question about what is a museum actually. Nelly, the floor is yours.
Wow. Thank you, Yvonne. This was really nice and long. Sorry for that. I am so delighted to join you today, this in-person conference. This is my first in-person conference after COVID, by the way, so I'm really excited. The opportunity to engage and exchange ideas with experts is indeed a privilege that I've missed. I extend my thanks to the organizers of this conference for making this happen. Thank you, Damhis, and thank you, Melia, for making this possible. This was also my dream, by the way. My presentation today will take us on a journey through my personal life and Beirut, the city I call home. In Lebanon, we have a saying, may God protect us from the I word. However, our memories are an integral part of who we are. The term afterlife and the title of my presentation, I must credit to Professor Priyambada Gopal, an esteemed academic, Indian academic from the University of Cambridge, whose research delves into history, memory, and colonialism. Professor Priyam argues that events in history do not exist in isolated past, present, or future states. Instead, they persist as afterlives, extending beyond temporal boundaries. This ongoing process defies finite classification. I find this statement quite relevant to our discussion today. To navigate this effectively, I have divided my talk into 3 distinct timeframes. We will begin by the first afterlife, called the past, where we will explore the themes of amnesia and remembrance. Additionally, we will gain insights into the life of Beirut, Lebanon's capital, through the lens of a unique building known as Beit Beirut. Our journey will then transition to the second afterlife, called the present, where we'll navigate the complex terrain of memory loss and retrieval, and also examine the evolving definition of museums as defined by the museums community and its implications on the Lebanese scene. Finally, we'll be looking into the third afterlife, called the future, a dimension marked by uprisings, by revolutions, and destruction, with a glimpse of hope in the horizon. Just recently, I was having a conversation with my husband regarding the increasingly trendy term resilience. By the way, I hate this term. This term has gained prominence, particularly in the not-for-profit sector, in response to the numerous crises our world is facing. This led me to embark on a deeply personal endeavor, an exploration of my own life's timeline, highlighting moments where resilience was required from either myself or my parents in the face of uncertainty. This exercise of self-reflection uncovered the selective nature of memory, my own memory, which was adept at erasing and obscuring numerous significant events. The challenge of recalling everything and the frequent omission of crucial details raised compelling questions. Is there value in remembering, or can we simply move forward? The outcome of this contemplative exercise, expressed in numerical terms, and I'm sure that I forgot so many, proved to be as shocking as the introspective journey itself. It's worth noting that I'm only 40 years old, firmly positioned in the middle of my lifetime expectancy. This prompted me to delve into profound questions. Does history, in fact, persist within the present moment? Is the act of remembering truly crucial? Or can we perhaps find comfort in the idea of forgetting and moving forward? My pursuit of answers led me to a case study that had stirred considerable controversy within the Lebanese community. Known locally as the Barakat building or the Yellow House, due to its ochre sandstone construction, this architectural gem is situated in the heart of Beirut. Constructed between 1924 and 1932 by prominent architects of the 30s, Yusuf Aftimus and Fuad Kozah, it stands as an early example of modern architecture in Beirut. At the time of its creation, the Barakat building was groundbreaking, incorporating concrete and introducing the concept of void and aesthetics within its structure. This architectural masterpiece marked a transition from traditional to modern building techniques. This building was designed for residential use and also featured various ground floor shops. In April 1975, the eruption of the Lebanese war transformed the Barakat building into a sniper's nest. Strategically positioned along the Green Line separating Beirut into east and west, the structure was abandoned by its residents and occupied by snipers. Throughout the 15-year Lebanese war, the building served as an important strategic military point and became known as the building of death. Snipers utilized the architecture to conceal themselves behind blind walls, installing bunker within the building, and the conflict left the Barakat building severely damaged by bombs, by bullets, and the installations that had taken root inside. In 1994, 4 years after the end of the war, the Barakat building was threatened by demolition. However, Lebanese heritage advocates campaigned for its preservation as an iconic architectural gem. Their efforts led to the halt in the demolition activities in 1998 and the building's eventual expropriation by the municipality of Beirut in 2006. Subsequently, the municipality, in collaboration with the French embassy in Beirut and Paris municipality, initiated a restoration project led by architect Youssef Haidar. The restoration project was initiated in October 2012. The original structure was fortified and a modern extension was added to the old Ottoman-style building to incorporate new facilities like an auditorium, a library, and a cafe. The works were carried out with an architectural, unique, and forward-thinking vision, as you can see on this slide. The goal was to transform the building into a museum and an urban cultural center, accessible to the public and overseen by an independent board. The building itself was treated as a 92 years old human being that had survived the war, bearing numerous wounds and having some missing limbs. The restoration process was similar to a surgical procedure, employing stitching and sutures to mend wounds and gray prosthetics, implants to replace missing elements. Notably, only technically and structurally necessary missing parts were replaced. Otherwise, they were left vacant. These prosthetics highlighted absence and emptiness. Traces of the war, such as the sniper's graffiti on the walls, were preserved and even put on display. However, this approach faced criticism from architects and heritage professionals in Lebanon, who deemed it an unsightly reminder of the war's horrors that should be erased rather than displayed. Haidar's concept defined the building as a living center dedicated to preserving the memory and history of Beirut, a profound memorial endeavor. Beit Beirut, as it came to be known, was envisioned as an inclusive cultural center encompassing a museum, a research, and documentation facility. Beit, by the way, in Arabic, it means house or home, so it's the home of Beirut. While the restoration was completed in 2013, it took an additional 3 years for the building to open its doors, inaugurated as an urban cultural center and not as a museum. However, all this being said, Beit Beirut is still not open to the public, except on rare occasions and special events. The excuse presented by the municipality of Beirut is the lack of resources. The argument used around the Barakat building's reopening primarily revolved around the absence of traditional museum collections that would categorize it as a real museum. But it is clear by now that this isn't the real reason. What Beit Beirut aims to achieve through the vision of Haidar is unity and social cohesion. Opening the building and allowing it to fulfill its role as a museum at the service of society is quite intimidating for the stakeholders. Telling our stories as Lebanese human beings, so we remember and reflect, is still not accepted by the majority of the stakeholders. This debate sheds light on the social power a museum can hold. It is a revealing reflection of what defines a museum and what it ought to be in the eyes of the community. But what is a real museum, after all? Is it a storage space for objects and artifacts, or is there something more to it? A museum is above all an experience, an authentic human emotional experience. It is all about the stories of the people. It is the people who makes the museum not the objects and not the collection. Museums work with narratives and not only with objects and artifacts. Intrinsically, what makes any narrative relevant is its personal and emotional aspect. I remember the first time I visited the building, the Barakat building, during the restoration period in 2014 with a group of museum and heritage experts. I remember that many couldn't continue the visit, and the impact of the building itself, with all the scars and the traces of the war, was so emotionally powerful that many had to pause and stop their visit. When you enter a museum, you step out of the present physical afterlife into a different dimension. This out of space, the state creates room for different reflections. It is a safe space where dialogue, empathy, listening, and learning is made possible. Museums can help people make sense of our complex and nuanced world that doesn't come with any simple answers. It is the perfect space, in my opinion, to tackle sensitive issues, providing answers to difficult questions. What differentiates a museum from many other cultural spaces is the positioning of the people's stories in the center of the museum's experience. That human aspect makes museums relevant to society. This is the case of Beirut. The traces of the war and the stories around this building are what constitutes the museum main collection. The people and their stories are the collection. On Wednesday, August 24th, 2022, the International Council of Museums approved a new definition of a museum that focused on history, inclusivity, and on community participation and reflection. This new definition is aligned with some of the major changes in the role of museums today. The new definition marks a shy transition from museums of and for objects to museums of and for the people, insisting on the participation of communities and on reflection, making it more relevant to the society it serves. The new definition encompasses the social role of the museum as a powerful space that can inspire and influence social change. So one might ask, what does all this have to do with Lebanon? And why is it important to have Beirut become a historic house museum for the memory of Beirut? Lebanon has been diagnosed by many as suffering from social amnesia, hypomnesia, and hyperamnesia. Following the end of the war, we as Lebanese just went from general amnesty to general amnesia as a self-defense mechanism in the face of a long history of trauma and political unrest. During the war, imagined myths of origins were contested, and differences in historical narratives were politically exploited to segregate the country into East and West. This imagined past and contradictory narratives are still being used to cause so many tensions between the different components of the Lebanese society. To this day, we do not have a homogeneous history textbook, and the books used in our schools stops their timeline in 1943, the date of the independence of Lebanon from the French mandate. 80 years of our modern history are simply wiped out. The efforts towards remembrance and a real memory exercise are not prevalent. This amnesia, hyperamnesia, and hypomnesia is keeping the Lebanese in an unstable state, victim of politically misused narratives. But how can we proceed and move forward? Rula, a 22 years old Lebanese student, said when asked about the memory of the war that it's not easy to remember and it's such a blessing to forget sometimes. She is only 22 years old, so she didn't live the war. She only heard about it from her parents. But how can one forget something he or she can't remember? History is ever present, passed down from one generation to another. It is ever present in the collective memory of the nations. The emotion caused and triggered by a traumatic or happy event are deeply engraved in our nervous system and passed down to us through the genes of our parents, same as genetic diseases and physical traits. So the act of remembering is inevitable. So instead of focusing on forgetting, maybe better focus on the process of remembering itself by asking the important questions: why and how to remember, but most importantly, who? Who gets to tell the story? History taught us that who owns the past has knowledge, and knowledge is power. Power to tell, power to hide, power to show stories, power to rewrite narratives and history, and use them to justify violent, unhuman acts. This is how historical narratives are being used by powerful politicians and decision makers to change discourses and rule the world using a twisted version of our stories and our narratives. And here comes the role of museums as an ideal place for memory, but also for forgetting. Adherent to the act of forgetting is an act of remembrance, an exercise of remembrance essential to reach inner peace and a sense of social cohesion. So why not do it in the most subtle, beautiful, safe way through a museum experience, through the use of art, beauty, aesthetics, architecture, empathy, and dialogue. On the 17th of October 2019, people took it to the streets all over Lebanon and not just in Beirut, demanding basic human rights. During the protests, people were asking questions related to their identity, to the history of the country, and their real stories as Lebanese. Very strong debates were taking place in the middle of the streets. I was there. But unfortunately, most of these major questions were left unanswered. Most of the Lebanese museums alienated themselves from the debate and did not stand with the people with little or no engagement in the social uprising. Yes, museums in Lebanon are neutral because they are ruled by the same elitist, well-established, connected to the corrupt political class ruling the country. The sector in Lebanon is deeply intertwined with the political elite and carries a very loaded colonial baggage, perpetuating the colonizers' discourse. Most of museums in Lebanon are cut off from the public, not inclusive, not accessible to the majority of the population. They manage the museums as sanctuaries, reserved to the chosen ones, to the well-educated people, and not for everyone. This is quite the opposite of what the new ICOM definition and world order in the museum world is about. Aren't all museums supposed to be public institutions that serves the society? Aren't they supposed to be at the heart of any social and cultural life? To conclude, I would like to mention the last traumatic event that shook Beirut. On the 4th of August 2020, a massive explosion shook the heart of Beirut, where a warehouse located at the port of Beirut was blown up, destroying the wheat silos and half of the city of Beirut, taking more than 200 lives, injuring more than 6,000, and displacing more than 300,000. Today, following the 4th of August explosion, Lebanese are demanding the preservation of the silos as a memorial, at a site of conscience, at a museum, where we can go remember, reflect, and maybe forgive. But most importantly, to bring justice to the victims, dead or alive, of this explosion. The proposal of the museum probably do not include any collection or artifacts, but it will be the house of many untold stories of fear, loss, remembrance, justice, and hope. To this day, 3 years after the explosion, the debate over the preservation of the silos still continues, and justice is still not served. So what is a museum if it does not aspire to bring social change and social justice and foster a better future? Where all the stories are being heard and acknowledged, especially the stories of the less privileged. What is our role as heritage practitioners and museum experts if it does not include a social responsibility to make all the voices heard and all the stories relevant? It is greatly, greatly ambitious, I know. But in the face of all the atrocities and uncertainties our world is facing today, I dare to dream. I dare to dream that museums can make our world better, that museums give us hope, hope that our stories will not be erased, that our memory will live on after we perish. Museums can give us hope that one day our voices will be heard and justice will be served. Thank you.